Good evening, everyone. This is Erin O'Toole, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and the candidate for the Conservative Party in Durham after being Member of Parliament since 2012. I'm so pleased to welcome you to our telephone town hall tonight, and we're also live on Facebook and YouTube. Tonight, I'm excited to be in my backyard talking to people across Ontario in the GTA about the path to recovery and how Canada's Conservatives will secure the future. You'll have the chance to hear about our Canada's Recovery Plan and ask me any question about the plan or the situation our country's in and how we will get our country and our economy back on track. If you have a question for me, please press *3 now and you can ask me live. This past year, and 15 months really, has been difficult for all of us. Across the country, families have lost loved ones. Hardworking Canadians have lost their jobs. Small business owners, especially in the GTA and hospitality, travel, tourism, are holding on, barely. And the cost of living is skyrocketing. Unfortunately, Ontario is in a very precarious spot, and we have to make sure the federal government has the back of those impacted. The health and economic crisis of COVID has had a massive impact on our businesses, jobs, families, and the mental health of our country. Instead of working with every fiber in his body to secure an economic recovery for Ontario, for every part of this great country, Justin Trudeau's called an election. We're in a fourth wave, but he's making a choice to put his own narrow political interests ahead of the health and economic interests of the country. And I sincerely hope that this decision doesn't cost us in our health and economic recovery, doesn't cost those families who've been already so hard hit. I want to be clear about this. I don't believe we should be having an election in the middle of the fourth wave when Parliament wasn't sitting, there was no defeat. It's a completely self-centered political decision by Justin Trudeau. If you have any questions on that, on the crisis or why there's an election, *3, and you can ask me live. Canada's Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole, I'm here to answer your questions, to be accountable. The deadly Delta variant is a risk to our country. It's torn through other countries and now it's hitting Ontario. So I don't think there should be politics played when we need to come together and work on the health and well-being of Canadians. Speaking of health and well-being, fortunately, our Conservative team is putting forward a plan for our economic future, to secure our future. Every part of Ontario's economy and our healthcare system has been affected by the pandemic, and a lot is at stake going forward. Canada's Conservatives will stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families, and we're going to do that with Canada's Recovery Plan, our 5-pillar plan to secure the future. First, by recovering 1 million jobs lost in the pandemic and more during 1 year. The second pillar, accountability. We need to bring in some of the swiftest and most severe anti-corruption laws in our history to improve transparency because we've had a government plagued by scandal. Our third pillar, mental health. We're going to implement the Canada Mental Health Action Plan to show leadership as we address some of the lingering impacts of this crisis. Fourth, we need to be more prepared as a country, more self-reliant, build up the capacity to respond to future pandemics and threats. Conservative government will get that done. And finally, secure the economy by balancing the budget over the next decade. We can't burden our children and grandchildren with more out of control Justin Trudeau spending. The election is about the future, and the choice is this. Who do you trust to secure your economic future? There are 5 parties, but actually only 2 choices. Canada's Conservatives with our Canada Recovery Plan, or more of the same from the Liberals and the other parties. I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. So as I said, hit *3 now if you have a question or comment, or leave a comment below if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. And our superstar moderator, sitting beside me here, our friend, the MP for a riding in Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes. It's a long title, but a great member. He's going to moderate this session tonight. I'm so proud to be here with my friend Michael Barrett. Take it away, Michael.
Well, thanks so much, Erin. And as Erin said, I've served as the Member of Parliament for Leeds-Grenville-Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes. And I'm moderating this discussion with Erin O'Toole tonight. And I have to start by saying I support Erin's vision for Canada, and I'm so proud to be part of this team. You know, Erin was raised in the working community of Bowmanville, right here in Ontario, with middle-class values of hard work and helping your neighbor. He served our country in the Royal Canadian Air Force for 12 years, and he's proudly represented the riding of Durham right here in Ontario in the House of Commons since 2012. Now, Erin stands up for hard-working Canadians, and he wants to work for you and to make sure that for generations to come, Canadians can grow up with world-class services, a healthy economy, and healthy finances. So the telephone town hall, we're just getting started. Press *3 if you have a question you want to ask Erin O'Toole live. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please comment below to ask Erin a question. So again, press *3 if you want to ask Erin O'Toole a question, if you're listening over the phone, and leave your comments online. So let's start with Philip. And Philip's question, it has to do with Mr. Trudeau calling this election. So Philip, you're live with Erin O'Toole right now.
So Erin, this is a bit of an unnecessary election, and obviously there's a lot of arrogance. How do we make the Liberals pay for that arrogance? How do we get the message across to people to say, you know, unnecessary election, such a critical time. Even up to yesterday, he had the chance to pull back and say things are imploding globally and in Canada with fires, with other issues. What's happening in Afghanistan is not a good reflection on our community, the way we've behaved. Haiti, problems there. We've got a lot of close connections with it there. So many things going on. To call an election is arrogant. How do we make them pay?
Well, Philip, you're absolutely right. This is a completely unnecessary election. This is only because Mr. Trudeau thinks he can benefit. And that's kind of been his attitude as Prime Minister. His private island holiday was for him and his friends, the President of the Liberal Party. He would benefit. His friends at SNC-Lavalin, his friends at We Charity. It's always about Mr. Trudeau and his friends. The Parliament is not even sitting. There's been no vote lost. In fact, I quite publicly said we're in a fourth wave. We should not be having an election. He didn't ask any of the other parties. He did this for his own reason. And as you said, we're in a fourth wave. We have horrible forest fires in British Columbia and other parts of the country. The BC fires are hard to watch. The situation in Afghanistan is horrific. It's heartbreaking to think the Taliban and what's going to happen with women and girls in that country. And for the thousands of veterans and their families who have a piece of themselves in Afghanistan, really, from their service, they're heartbroken as well. And as you said, earthquake in Haiti, there's so much going on that the Prime Minister did need to do this. How do we address the arrogance, as you said, Philip? How do we show that we're tired of Mr. Trudeau putting himself and his own interests ahead of the interests of the country? There's one way. It's voting in a Conservative government with an ethical leader, with a great team. We have amazing candidates running for us across the country, including in Southern Ontario. And we have a plan, Canada's recovery plan, that I launched today. We launched the 5 pillars in March, and we have the most detailed plan that our country's ever seen in an election, because our country's in a precarious situation after the last 15 months. So, Philip, if you're frustrated, as many people are, channel that, look at the Conservative Party, talk to your friends, tell them about Canada's recovery plan. I'd like to earn your trust, and I'd like to make sure everyone gets back on track after COVID.
So you can press *3 now if you want to ask Erin O'Toole a question. And before we get to the next question, I'm going to ask you a question. If you are going to vote for the Conservative Party in the next election, and if you are, you can press 1 now. If you're going to vote for one of the other parties, press 2. And if you haven't decided, press 3. So our next question is about the environment. And this is Janice from Whitby with a question. And you're live right now with Erin O'Toole. Janice, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. O'Toole. The last I heard, the majority of the Canadian Conservatives voted against your climate change plan. Where does the party stand on that issue now?
Climate change is critical for me, Janice, not just as someone asking for your trust to be Prime Minister, as a father of young kids. The issue I talk about the most with my daughter Molly is climate change. She wants to make sure we take it seriously, and we are. That's why I launched Canada's recovery plan today in great detail, but the only major portion of this plan we launched months ago was our plan on climate change. Why? Because I understand we have to earn some trust on this issue. And I'm determined to earn that trust because I think, and I know from our plan, we can get our emissions down, we can meet our Paris targets, we can work together, and we can have an economic recovery. So our climate change plan will meet our Paris targets. It prices carbon. It's going to allow Canadians to actually get to know what their carbon footprint is. It will also get the economy working again. So our price of carbon is a third of the one Mr. Trudeau uses, and we're trying to not use his tax model. It's going up, it's making us less competitive. We're proposing a solution that would allow people to pay that price into their own low carbon personal savings account. And then the only restriction would be future purchases with that amount would have to lower your carbon footprint through a variety of means, anything from a purchase of a furnace, better windows, an EV. There's so many options that will actually stimulate creativity, entrepreneurship to tack into people's low carbon savings account. There'll be people marketing under this model. It's innovative. And we work, Janice, with one of the top climate change modeling firms in the country so that I can tell you our plan is modeled and it's third-party verified. So I want you to take a look at it because this is an important issue. And in Whitby, we're very fortunate to have an incredible candidate in Maliha Shahid, who's already a councillor in Whitby, already a passionate volunteer, a mom, someone I've known for many years. I would love to see her return a strong voice in the seat that my friend, the late Jeremy Flaherty, represented, a great finance minister who led Canada through some difficult times in the last global recession. He was actually recognized for that as part of the Conservative government. We're going to need that same focus now to get back to balance, which we're going to do over the next 10 years. So Janice, check out our climate change plan in here. There's actually some third-party quotes from independent university professors and Clean Prosperity talking about how serious our plan is. Let's secure the future and make sure we have a strong environment as well.
You can press *3 now if you want to ask your question to Erin O'Toole. The next question that we have comes from Lawrence in Vaughan. Lawrence, for your question about the rise in anti-Semitism in Canada, you can go ahead for Erin O'Toole right now.
Hi, Lawrence.
I recently listened to an online phone call, and you mentioned Muslim hatred in Canada, and the Jewish hatred is far and away greater than Muslim hatred, but you did not mention this. I find this upsetting from a conservative leader.
Well, actually, Lawrence, I've talked about one of the biggest epidemics within the pandemic is hate and intolerance, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, a range of anti-Asian hate that we've got to stamp out and speak out strongly against. In fact, the creeping elements of anti-Semitism with the boycott, divest, and sanction movement, BDS, I've spoken about, Lawrence, for 6 years. In fact, I think anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine of hate. And I tackle issues like BDS and others because this is sort of what some people use as a softer version of anti-Semitism, where they're targeting Israel, but only targeting the country because it's a Jewish state. So in our platform, we have a very comprehensive set of policies on foreign policy. Canada needs to stand up for our values at home and abroad. We need to stand up and respect our ally Israel, which we have a strong track record doing. We have to also stamp out anti-Semitism here at home. So we've spoken about this for some time, Lawrence, and in fact some of the leadership pioneered under the Conservative government led by Mr. Harper. We're going to try and make sure that we are a beacon for human rights, for tolerance on the world stage. And with the current situation of Mr. Trudeau not even showing up for a vote about a genocide taking place in China right now, he didn't show up for a vote on human rights. This is the country that, under Mr. Mulroney, was one of the leaders in the fight in the Commonwealth against apartheid. We stood up for the aggression of Mr. Putin in Crimea and in the Donbass region. So I want Canada to be a leader on human rights around the world. I also make sure, as leader, I'm going to stand up and speak up about rising hatred in many parts of this country. That is, as I said, a shadow part of this pandemic has been the rise in hate and intolerance.
If you have a question for Erin O'Toole, you can press *3 on your phone now. Our next question comes from Karen in Burlington, who has a question about mental health. Karen, you can go ahead with your question. You're live with Erin O'Toole now.
Well, thank you for taking my call and my question, firstly. Mental health. You came out on the news and you said that you can put a plan in place for mental health. I don't want a plan. I want action.
Absolutely.
Like, give us a solid plan.
Well, Karen, to be Prime Minister, I'm putting my plan of action before you, and that's why tonight I'm asking for your trust. And there's been no one in Parliament work on mental health more than me in the last 8 years, because it's something I saw firsthand as a veteran when our squadron and people in Nova Scotia responded to the crash of the Swiss Air Flight 111. I saw how that impacted some of my colleagues. And it was just at the time that the military was starting to come to grips with mental injuries from service. So I've long said we need to treat physical conditions, physical health issues, the same way with mental health issues. Get people the help they need and get it quick. We need to reduce the stigma. This is something I worked on as a volunteer when I left the military with military families and veterans. It's something I've worked on in Parliament on a non-partisan basis. Romeo Dallaire, who was a Liberal senator at the time, and I have an annual event on mental health. It's very important to me, and after this last year of the pandemic, as I talked about earlier with Lawrence, we've seen a rise in hate. We've also seen a rise in addiction, in depression rates, eating disorders in young people. There isn't really a family out there that hasn't seen someone in their immediate family or close contacts impacted. So the plan of action I'm presenting to you, Karen, is not just partnering with the provinces. We're going to actually partner with on-the-ground groups by providing direct aid for them to build capacity to address issues on the ground in the communities across Canada, including in the GTA. We're going to start a 988 suicide prevention hotline. We're going to work with employers to incentivize the creation or expansion of wellness programming for their employees. And we are going to pilot 1,000 treatment beds for addiction and direct community supports, because I believe we need to give tools of recovery. The opioid crisis is now hitting all parts of the country. This isn't just a BC crisis. It's worse there, but it's impacting Oshawa, my own community. So I have a track record of action, Karen. So if you're tired of a Prime Minister that does photo ops and never delivers, give me your vote and you'll see action.
So if you're going to vote Conservative in the election, you can press 1 on your phone now. If you're going to vote for one of the other parties, press 2. And if you're unsure, press 3. You can press *3 at any time, and you can ask your question live to Erin O'Toole. If you have a question and you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, put a question in the comments. And we have one of those questions now, and it comes from Andrew. Andrew asks, what is your plan for the GST?
Well, thanks, Andrew. Here's a really exciting part of Canada's recovery plan. We're going to give you a GST holiday in December. And why are we going to do that? There's two key reasons. It's been a tough year and a half for our country. People, particularly hard hit by the pandemic, are seeing the cost of living skyrocket. Inflation under Mr. Trudeau is 10-year high. We want to give people a break. At the end of the year, at a time where families come together, it's Christmas, presents, what a perfect time to have a GST holiday as a kickstart. But here is the second part of the way we're going to do this, Andrew. We're going to actually make it for retail bricks and mortar stores. This isn't to go on and buy from a big web giant. This is to help mom and pop stores that, especially in Ontario, have had large closures because of COVID-19, that in many cases are holding on by a thread. So we're going to have a way of helping them directly. And I know a lot of Canadians do, because Michael, you would have seen it in Brockville and Grenville. You would have seen how there were shop local initiatives all throughout the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Help your main street. People were doing curbside pickup. Canadians want to help. This will accelerate an end of year for our retailers, help us head in to the end of year in a way that's going to help our mom and pop retail operations, but give Canadians a break. We also are going to have an incredible Dine and Discover program where we're going to have a rebate on going out to dine at sort of low periods in the midweek. And we're going to work with provinces on when this would roll out for a month in each province. And we're going to have a Discover this incredible country, where you'll have a 15% tax credit for a staycation within Canada. These are all little measures, the GST measure up front, but measures that will give people a break. Affordability is a real issue, and kickstart some consumer spending for some of the businesses that need it so much. So Andrew, I think Canadians deserve a break, and wouldn't it be great to end the year with that GST holiday?
If you have a question for Erin O'Toole, you can press *3 now. Our next question comes from Susan in Newmarket, and she has a question about childcare. And Susan, you are live now. Please go ahead and ask your question to Erin O'Toole.
Hey, I'm asking about the 75% tax rebate. I'm wondering if that's the best route to go, or is there some other way that we can give parents, families a break?
Well, thanks, Susan. What is great about our approach on childcare is it will help all families. We're actually letting families be in the driver's seat here, and it will be immediate. Mr. Trudeau is promising something 5 to 6 years from now that will only apply to some families. I think families need flexibility. If we've seen anything from the last year and a half, families need flexibility as they juggle work, life, raising their children. And so this is about empowering it. Families will be better off, and we're going to have it income related. So folks at the lower income levels will receive 75% of the costs. We think it's a way that helps immediately, helps the most people, and adapts flexibility for all families. So this is important to us. There's been so much disruption, upheaval. There's been so much dislocation, particularly a lot of the progress made by women in the workforce. Our colleague Raquel Dancho held Mr. Trudeau to account. She's 30. She said, under your watch, 30 years of progress. Her entire life has slipped away for women in the workforce. So this allows everyone to have flexibility to make decisions what works best for them. If they have shift work, if they have some sort of hybrid, some work at home, work some days, this gives as much flexibility as is needed and will be immediate. So the Liberals have promised a national approach to a system they don't control. This is the provincial-led. They promised this 9 times. I like to say even cats only get 9 lives, right, Michael?
That's
so
right.
Vote for our program. It's in here in detail, Susan. And in Newmarket, we've got a great community champion in Harold Kim, great experience in the private sector, in the economy, because we need a strong economy to secure our great social programs.
So while we're also asking Erin questions, we have a question for you. If you're going to vote Conservative in the next election, on Election Day, press 1 now. If you're going to vote for one of the other parties, press 2. And if you're unsure, press 3. Erin, I keep saying in the next election, because it's still hard to believe that Justin Trudeau decided during a pandemic with all that's going on to call this election. So we have Linda, who has a question for you about accountability. So Linda, you can go ahead. You're live with Erin O'Toole now.
Okay, so my question is, everyone is saying you're going to tax the rich. No one says who these rich people are, because I've generally found that after taxes, it's the middle class. And I've watched Parliament and their debates, and basically all it is a deflection and then saying how great somebody is. If I ran a company like Parliament is run, it would be bankrupt almost immediately. And this, unfortunately, this is a long question. Everyone is talking about bullying in schools and how we have to make people more aware of bullying. You know what? Everyone's aware of it. What are you going to do about it? We don't need more awareness. Everyone's aware. Those are my questions. So anyway, pick one.
All right. Well, listen, thanks, Linda. You know, accountability and living up to your pledge is exactly what Canada's recovery plan is. Check out Conservative website. I actually have a very note on why we have such a detailed plan. We need it. After this last year, Mr. Trudeau has run up almost $500 billion of debt. We've spent more than most of our peer countries in the G7 and others, but we have some of the highest unemployment. We already saw $160 billion of jobs and investment leave Canada before COVID. We saw rail blockades that the NDP were supporting to shut down the Shut Down Canada movement. How does that help working families? How does that help the economy? So when it comes to taxes, we're going to keep taxes low. We will never do what Mr. Trudeau is planning to do, or at least putting the groundwork to do, which is tax home equity. A lot of people ask me why he has the CMHC studying this, why CRA is tracking it. A lot of people fear the only reason Mr. Trudeau has no plan to get to balance is that he's going to tax the capital gains in someone's primary residence. The Conservatives will fight against that, and we will try and keep taxes low. As you said, they will often say that they're going to tax the rich, they're going to do this. We need to make sure that people pay their fair share. We need to come down hard on tax evaders. We're going to actually give CRA the teeth to do that. We've been very critical of some large corporations that were making record profits and still taking some of the programs Mr. Trudeau was offering. We should have pivoted those programs to the highly affected sectors like hospitality, travel, and tourism, as I talked about. So, Linda, I will be accountable. I served in the military, worked in the private sector. As you said, if some of Mr. Trudeau's record was analyzed in the private sector, broken promises on all of his budgets, broken promises on safe drinking water on reserve, broken promises on ethics and accountability. I think Canadians deserve better. We've got the plan, we've got a great team, and I hope we can count on your support.
If you have a question for Erin O'Toole, you can press *3 on your phone now. Erin, you talked about accountability in your answer with Linda, and broken promises, broken laws. We saw some very disappointing, to be generous, conduct from Justin Trudeau over the past 6 years. You named me as your shadow minister for ethics. It's a role I was proud to take on. I didn't appreciate how busy I would be, thinking that perhaps the Prime Minister would hold himself to a high standard. So what are we going to do with Canada's recovery plan to restore Canadians' confidence in their democratic institutions, to restore that accountability that should come with everyone who holds public office, especially the Prime Minister?
Great question. You've been doing a great job, Michael, and you and the ethics commissioners over the last year, some of the busiest people in Ottawa under Mr. Trudeau. I think we're now on Trudeau 3. That's the latest investigation into breaches by Mr. Trudeau. Bill Morneau had Morneau 2 before he resigned with the We Charity scandal. That's why the second pillar is accountability. It's transparency. It's an anti-corruption law, because there's a culture of entitlement here with Mr. Trudeau. It's always his friends and folks around him. His friends, people get contract, family from the We Charity. Suddenly there's a sole source contract there. SNC-Lavalin lobbying to actually related to a criminal proceeding. We're going to prevent that. We're not going to allow lobbying to go to a legal proceeding. That shouldn't be what government relations is about. Mr. Trudeau fired Jody Wilson-Raybould when she wouldn't do what he wanted with respect to what his friends at SNC wanted. So Mr. Trudeau always puts it about himself, and I think that set a tone for his team, because there's been multiple ministers also come under investigation. And the cover-up of sexual misconduct allegations in the Canadian Armed Forces probably upsets me the most, because I'll tell you, we have to have the back for women who step up to serve their country. They need to be able to serve Canada with respect and free of harassment. And when Trudeau's office ignored the complaint of a woman for 3 years, covered it up along with his defense minister and everything else, how does that send a message to more women to step up and serve their country? So it's time for accountability. It's time for transparency. That is in our plan, because we have to restore public faith in our institutions.
Absolutely. So a question for those who are joining us on the phone. If you're going to be voting Conservative in the next election, you can press 1 now. If you're voting for one of the other parties, please press 2. And if you're undecided, you can press 3. And if you have a question for Erin O'Toole, you can press *3 at any time. Our next question comes from Akil, and he has a question about the situation in Afghanistan. Please go ahead. You're live now with Erin O'Toole.
Hi. Should the Conservative government come to power, I wanted to understand what will be the Canadian stand on the crisis in Afghanistan, where a terrorist organization has taken over a country, and how will you propose to deal with it on a long-term basis? Will you be starting to have negotiations done with this terrorist organization, or will you maintain the stand that Canada only has a certain standard below which it never goes?
Thank you for the question, Akil. The images we've seen out of Afghanistan are literally heart-wrenching. People holding onto planes, people falling from planes, taking off. The fear in the eyes of people is horrific to watch. I think about the women and girls that once again will be under the repressive Taliban regime. And I've heard from some of my friends who served in Afghanistan. I'm a veteran, but I never served in Afghanistan. But thousands of our men and women did. And this is heartbreaking for them. One of them sent me a note saying part of him is still there. And it breeds a bit of hopelessness. So first off, I want to say to any veterans that may be part of this town hall tonight, you served your country, you served alongside our allies, you served with distinction, and you showed the best of our values as a country. I know so many stories of how young girls were able to go to school, how we helped build capacity in communities. So as much as Vimy Ridge is part of our history, so is Operation Medusa and Kandahar and Canada's commitment. So what will we do? We will immediately work to get anyone at risk having served with us as interpreters or contractors out of that country. We will work with our allies to provide aid and as much humanitarian support as possible. And we will work with our allies to hold the regime to account for conduct. We will not recognize a terrorist regime, and we will push and isolate for better conduct and better treatment of people within that country. Let me say for a second, Akil, I've become friends with folks that have come to Canada from Afghanistan as refugees and are now running businesses, including in my part of the Durham region, contributing to our community, our economy, coming with very little, but excited about the opportunity of Canada. And for the last 6 years, myself, some veterans, some passionate Canadians have been trying to get our left behind interpreters out of Afghanistan, and the Trudeau government was asleep at the switch. They've left people there. And it's horrible to see the images, knowing he had years to act, months to act since the Biden announcement. It's heartbreaking. I will always put our interests, our values, people who stood with us first.
If you have a question for Erin O'Toole, you can press *3 on your phone now. Our next question comes from Fred, and he has a question about veterans. Fred, you can go ahead. You're live now with Erin O'Toole.
Hi, Erin. Trudeau said some time ago that veterans are asking for too much, but yet they give their lives for this country. Question one is, what will you do for veterans? And secondly, Trudeau again has given, was it $500 for seniors, provided you were over 75. Well, seniors are over 65, not 75. What can you do for seniors? Thanks.
Well, thanks for both questions, Fred. One of the most transformative parts of my life was joining the Canadian Armed Forces and serving. I like to joke I was kind of an average camper in the military. I rose to captain. I got my wings as a navigator. I'm very proud of that service. But fortunately, I took more out of my service than it took out of me. I was already in the reserves in law school when 9/11 happened, and I'm fortunate I didn't leave with an injury. But I said to my commanding officer, Al Blair, when he tried to talk me into becoming a legal officer and staying in the military, I said, look, when I get out, I'm going to do what I can to stand by our men and women in uniform and military families. And that led me to help start the True Patriot Love Foundation. It led to my passion on mental health, some of the work I've done with Romeo Dallaire and groups like True Patriot Love, Wounded Warriors, Veterans Canada, a whole range. And that led me to be Veterans Minister, where I expanded mental health offerings. We got wait times down. We settled lawsuits. I had a lot more to do, fixing the gap between the military and Veterans Affairs. If we can fix that, there'll be so few claims to resolve to create backlogs. But the biggest thing I'll ask on, Fred, is I think we need more treatment options for our veterans with mental health injuries. And we also need them and their families to be able to take kind of the stewardship on picking the best service option for them. Because with a physical injury, we know how to treat it. With mental health injuries, there's often 1, 2, maybe 3 options that need to be tried until the veteran finds the right balance. And we need to work with them on that path of wellness. Getting the backlogs down, expanding mental health services and supports will be key. On seniors, you're right, Fred. I heard from a lot of seniors that have said, has Mr. Trudeau suddenly created 2 classes of seniors in terms of a payment benefit or a program? He didn't really describe why he did this, and the cynical person in me, and I'm often cynical when it comes to Justin Trudeau, these checks to some people landed just before he decided to call it an election. That was kind of surprising, wasn't it, Michael? You know, as he keeps expanding the time frame for all of the programs from COVID, he has no plan. We do, but he just keeps kicking issues down the road. And I'll talk to many parts of the economy that can't find employees because we've got to pivot the needs to the pandemic now, not as it was 14 months ago. So seniors should not be 2 classes. We should make sure that they have dignity, they have the ability to keep up with the cost of living. We have a program that will help senior care benefit more families to be able to take in an aged parent. We need to have more supports through our disability tax credit. And we have to fight the affordability crisis, the inflation that's caused under Mr. Trudeau and his ever-increasing approach on taxes. So Fred, veterans and our seniors, and some seniors are veterans, are always going to be someone that we try and serve as a government. We'll be ethical. We have a plan. And Fred, I'd ask you to take a look at it, and we'd ask for your support.
If you have a question for Erin O'Toole and you're joining us on the phone, you can press *3 now. If you're joining us on Facebook, you can put your question into the comments below. A question from Facebook from Cassandra. I would like to know how we are preparing for better health care. This country had an issue with health care pre-pandemic.
Well, thanks, Cassandra, healthcare has been strained to the max. We've gone through an incredible crisis and we're still in it. We're in the fourth wave. We've learned a lot, but one constant from the beginning till now are front lines. Nurses, PSWs, technicians, physicians, the public health agencies. When my wife Rebecca and I had COVID, our public health nurse checked in every day, handled some of the questions and uncertainty that we know families face. And so we want to make sure that they're not burning out, and we want to make sure we work with our provincial partners to address that. I really want to promote a collaborative federalism as opposed to the Ottawa knows best approach of Mr. Trudeau, which is why I've promised the Premier's stable, predictable, and without strings attached funding so that they can make and adapt to improve systems that were caught to be short in the pandemic. The pandemic put long-term care, put our healthcare system through the ringer, and we've got to improve it. We've also announced that we would have a minimum of 6% in terms of increase for health. If the economy can rocket back the way I think we can, if we're successful and we're able to implement Canada's recovery plan, that 6% will be the minimum. But that will allow our provincial partners to plan. We will also be doing things, as I said, in addiction and on-the-ground support for mental health outside of the traditional healthcare system as well. We will be a partner. And the final thing I'll say, credential recognition. We have a lot of healthcare professionals from abroad that have a long time trying to get their credentials recognized. I said a few weeks ago, this will be a priority, even before the election was called, that we want to solve this issue. Now more than ever, we saw some people that were coming to help in our strained systems that were permanent residents or temporary workers on the route to citizenship. We need to accelerate credential recognition to help build up our ranks in our frontline healthcare.
If you have a question for Erin O'Toole, you can press *3 on your phone now. And before we get to the next question, if you haven't yet already made a decision in our poll, I'll give you the opportunity right now. You can press 1 if you're going to be voting Conservative in the next election. You can press 2 if you're voting for one of the other parties, and you can press 3 if you're undecided on how you vote on election day. Our next question comes from Peter with a question about affordability measures for couples. So Peter, you can go ahead. You're live now with Erin O'Toole.
Mr. O'Toole, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Peter. Thank you.
Mr. O'Toole, first I'd like to say what an honor it is to talk with a former veteran. First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you very much for your service.
Oh, thank you.
I've heard a lot of great questions concerning veterans, our retirees. Both are people that put their lives on the line for us, built this country, and we can never do enough for them. And I know Mr. Trudeau, and I use that term lightly, says he's given all that we can give, and I find that insulting. But that's not my question. That's just my one point that I wanted to say. Mr. O'Toole, I always hear a lot about families with children, children daycare benefits, soccer programs. But what about families that have decided that life with children is a little too expensive, a little too hard, and decided to go without having children? What benefits, what tax breaks will they get? And again, thank you very much for taking my question.
Well, thank you very much, Peter. And look, we want to provide relief for all Canadians. We have, as I said, our approach for childcare will help all families in the short term. It will have all parents qualify, not some 5 to 6 years from now. In terms of what you're talking about, outside of supports for families with children, we're also going to be giving working Canadians a $1 raise. Now, it may be modest, but it's significant when you look at our commitment to double the Canada Workers Benefit. That will dramatically give a benefit of about $2,800 to individuals, up to $5,000 for some families by doubling that Canada Workers Benefit. It amounts to like a $1 raise. Federally, obviously, we don't set wage rates outside of those for federally regulated businesses, but with doubling this Canada Workers Benefit, we want to show that we're going to be there for working families, particularly working at a hard time for our country with cost of living going up, groceries, gas. There's a housing crisis, especially in the GTA. So this is something we're going to apply, and that will target, I think, the people that need it the most. Our Canada Job Surge plan will pay up to 50% of the salary of new hires when the programs under Mr. Trudeau expire in October, because we want to accelerate people to get to work. It'll be 25% for all new hires, 50% for chronically unemployed, people that have been unemployed for 10 months or more. We need to make sure that they have the chance to get to work, and if we can accelerate through our job surge, this will incentivize hiring. We need to get the country working again. And you know, whether you're getting up early to drive a cab in Mississauga, to open your small business in Vaughan, whether you're working at General Motors in Oshawa, where my dad worked when I grew up, there's a nobility in working hard and providing for your family and being part of a growing community that has each other's backs. That's my background. I want to see that. So we're going to target support at working families. We're going to target additional support for all families to qualify for childcare support. And we're going to, with our job surge, really make sure that we can accelerate hiring for people that have been unemployed as a part of COVID.
So if you have a question for Erin O'Toole and you'd like to ask that, you can press *3 now. Our next question comes from Chris. He has a question about energy independence. Chris, you're live now with Erin O'Toole. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hey, Mr. O'Toole, big fan, big supporter. My question has to do with energy independence. Donald Trump had led America to energy independence. Joe Biden comes in, obviously cripples the Keystone Pipeline, and we as Canadians are all paying for this now. When are we going to decouple ourselves from America, and when are we going to start using our vast reserves of oil so all Canadians can benefit from it? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chris. This is a really interesting question because, yeah, I have never seen Canada-U.S. relations at a lower point. They are at a nadir. So Mr. Trudeau thinks it's a success if he gets a dinner hosted by our neighbor. I want to get deals done for softwood, for our energy. We want to make sure that we have that Canada-U.S. supply chain, and we're not part of Buy American. We are not just any other country out there. When I go to Washington, I visit the Canadian Cross of Sacrifice in Arlington because Americans died serving with Canadian units in World War I, and they were honored. We fought and died together. We've got family relations. We've got the best trade relationship in the world. We have the longest undefended border in the world. We're the only country that works on domestic homeland security with the United States. It was a Canadian on duty on 9/11, and we're coming up to that important anniversary. And I was on with Newfoundland Labrador earlier, Gander. We opened our arms because the U.S. is like family. We have to restore that. Part of the reason why it's so bad, Chris, Mr. Trudeau is completely out of step with respect to China. Under 3 presidents, when it comes to steel and aluminum, when it comes to technology and cybersecurity, and when it comes to Huawei and global human rights. We have to align with our interests, economically, security. We have to stand up for the 2 Michaels and the dignity of human rights. And we have to align with our closest allies. Mr. Trudeau is seen as an unreliable partner. I will make sure that we renew that relationship. And then what we need to do is have North American energy independence. That's why Line 5, Mr. Trudeau is losing that battle, not even really putting up a fight for a critical pipeline for Ontario and Quebec. Our resources in Canada, oil and gas, minerals, softwood, are the most ESG, environmentally, socially governed in the world, the best Indigenous partnerships in the world. The democratic world should be using Canadian resources. And so let's push that. Let's make sure we work with the U.S., stand up for our interests, and I think I will be taken seriously in Washington. I served in the military and often did training with our friends in the U.S. and with NATO. I worked on trade issues for a company based out of the United States employing people making things in Canada. When I go to Washington, I meet with veterans on the Hill. I make sure we build strong relationships. I don't go for a state dinner. I go to fight for our interests. So I think we can improve the U.S. relationship, Chris, push our resources, not just for access in the U.S. The democratic world should not be relying on countries like Venezuela, Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, and others. So it's time to be proud of what we produce in this country. And as part of our recovery plan, we need the economy to recover in all sectors and in all regions of the country. Let's get it done. See, it has such a large, it's so detailed it makes a thud.
That's a real plan. You can tell by the weight of it. We've got a question from Roberto on Facebook about housing affordability, but I think we have time for one more question on the phone. So we're going to hear from Pam, who also has a question about affordability. Maybe you can do both answers at the same time. And hopefully the producers are okay with me putting a 2-for-1 there. Pam, you're live now with your affordability question for Erin O'Toole.
Hello, Mr. O'Toole. I was wondering if you could help me. My son, we live in Burlington, Ontario. We've lived here all our lives. And my son is like in his 40s now. He has been saving for a home for years, and he cannot get one anywhere. If he wants to go somewhere, it's usually about Port Dover, which is 2 hours away, or an hour and a half away from where he works. Is there anything you can do, or what your government would do, to help young people be able to afford a home in this area?
Thank you very much for the question, Pam. And the housing crisis is real in Southern Ontario, in the GTA, and Burlington, Durham. It's real, and the epicenter was in the Lower Mainland of BC. So we've been the only party in the last year to be putting forward real ideas to try and address the skyrocketing crisis. The biggest thing is supply. So we need to make sure we work with the municipalities and the provinces to increase supply. We've got an ambitious plan that we think can massively improve supply by about 1 million units by using some of the federal land. We're one of the largest landowners in the country, and making sure about 15% of that is provided for an accelerated housing development program. We need to tie some of the federal infrastructure dollars to density with transit investments and building to make sure we're unlocking potential as part of these infrastructure investments. We need to ban foreign non-resident buying. We can't allow other people to park money here, driving up our costs. And in some parts of Vancouver, I've been on the streets, there's just empty homes. We need to not put a 1% surcharge, as Mr. Trudeau did, thinking that was a solution. There's no need for it. There's a crisis in some parts of our country when it comes to entering the housing market. And I don't want, Pam, your son to give up that dream. It shouldn't just be for everyone that came before. He's kind of tail end Gen X, early TARP part of millennial. So we need to make sure that that's there. So the first-time home buyer program under the Trudeau government is simply not working. We're going to fix that to try and make sure that all of these things provide more supply, eliminate some of the added cost pressures. We're going to work with the mortgage stress test. We're going to allow for first-time home buyers longer mortgage terms so they can lock in certainty. That's another federal tool. So we've worked at this very carefully, Pam. We've been putting forward ideas because I have a shadow minister of housing who's a millennial from BC, and he knows most of his friends cannot afford a home. So we can't do things like it was done 40 years ago. We have to address the issues of today. Canada's recovery plan is what our country needs to kickstart a recovery and to deal with the housing crisis, the affordability crisis. So Pam, please check it out. I hope we can earn your vote. And I'll tell you, in Burlington, we've got an amazing candidate in Emily Brown. She is committed. She's got tremendous experience. She's been a professor, a business person, active volunteer. Please check out Emily and send us your support.
Well, thank you so much, Erin, for taking all of these questions. Our Conservative team is ready to deliver Canada's recovery plan and stand up for hardworking Canadians and their families. That's why I'm glad you're leading Canada's Conservatives in this election. You're the man with the plan, like it says on the cover there. So if you did not have a chance to ask your question this evening, please stay on the line and leave a message for our staff. Your question is important, and we'd like a chance to respond to you.
Well, thank you, Michael. You were a great host. This is our second town hall tonight. We went from Newfoundland and Labrador to the GTA, low emission town halls, right?
Absolutely.
Because we're basically here, and you've been great at both, so thank you. I know you'll be busy on the ethics file over the coming weeks because Mr. Trudeau's suing Parliament to try and keep his cover-up of the Winnipeg lab documents. It is crazy. And we've had a great discussion tonight with thousands of people in the GTA on this telephone town hall, on YouTube, on Facebook. We've had questions from Philip on why we're having the election, Karen on mental health. We had questions on seniors, on accountability, Akil on Afghanistan, Chris on energy independence, and Pam, what a good way to end. You know, the housing crisis in the GTA is critical. And Canadians are not going to get a solution from the Liberals, the NDP, and the Greens. They actually don't want an economic recovery in all sectors. They want to pick or choose who's going to get a job again after COVID. It's time to get Ontario's economy back on track. Focus on the folks that need additional help to kickstart an economic recovery to secure the future. This is the plan we need. Canada's recovery plan. Please check it out. We put it out on the second day of the election, and it's getting costed by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and we'll put another edition out because we're going to be accountable to you. Check out our website. Look us up on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. If you have any questions on our program, get in touch. We're here for you. We're here to provide an ethical team that's ready to serve, to secure the future for you and your children. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good evening.